911 with the address of...
Yeah. Hi. Listen.
What's going on?
My girlfriend's daughter is killed. Yeah.
What's going on there?
My girlfriend, I'm sorry, my daughter's, he chopped her head off.
A mother's voice screaming into a 911 dispatcher, her words falling apart mid-sentence, because she is standing in the doorway right now, looking at something she cannot make her mind accept. The dispatcher asks her to describe what she's seeing. She can't get the words out. This is the moment the case breaks wide open. 12 hours earlier, her daughter was sitting on the front porch, 8 months pregnant, scrolling on her phone, thinking about a baby shower and a name for the daughter she hadn't met yet. She had no idea she was living the last day of her life. Across town, a security camera catches a man walking alone in the dark just past midnight, carrying a laundry basket. It looks heavier than laundry should. He disappears behind a smoke shop. He comes back empty-handed, wiping his palms on his jeans like they're still not clean. The next morning, construction workers digging through a dumpster catch a smell that makes one of them step back before he even sees what's underneath. 30 seconds later, someone's dialing 911.
911, what's the emergency, please?
And neighbors downstairs will later describe a sound they can't shake. Something rhythmic, something steady, coming through the ceiling for longer than a fight should last. At the time, they turned the TV up and told themselves it was nothing. 3 strangers, 3 ordinary moments. None of them know yet that they're all connected to the same night, the same apartment, the same young woman. Before we go further, this case involves graphic descriptions of violence and details some viewers may find deeply disturbing. If this is your first time here, welcome to Crime Trail Archives. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming, and drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're watching from. It's June 9th, 2022. The address is a modest apartment building on Boulevard Street in Alton, Illinois, a small city along the Mississippi River just north of St. Louis. Since the previous evening, a mother named Heidi Noel hasn't been able to reach her daughter. It isn't like her. They talk constantly, and lately even more than usual, because her daughter is due to give birth in a matter of weeks. By mid-morning, the calls are going straight to voicemail. Heidi tells herself there's an explanation. Maybe her phone died. Maybe she's asleep. But the feeling doesn't go away, and by early afternoon, she decides she isn't waiting any longer. She drives to the apartment herself. When she arrives, just after 1 o'clock, something is already wrong. She lets herself in, calling out a name that gets no answer. What she finds inside is beyond anything a parent should ever have to process. Her daughter is dead. Heidi calls 911 immediately, her voice barely holding together as she tries to explain what she's looking at. The woman she found is 22-year-old Liese Dodd, nearly 8 months pregnant, days away from a baby shower her family had already started planning. Within minutes, patrol units are dispatched to the scene. Among the first officers through the door is a young responder named Evan, who will later describe it as the kind of call that never gets easier, no matter how many times you answer one like it. What they find inside confirms what Heidi already knew the moment she stepped through the door. This isn't a medical emergency. It's a homicide scene, and a particularly brutal one. Elsewhere on the property, evidence will soon be found that helps investigators understand exactly what happened here and how recently. For now, all anyone at the scene knows is this: a young, expectant mother is dead in her own home, and whoever did this didn't do it quietly. The investigation into what happened to Liese Dodd is only just beginning. To understand what happened to Liese Dodd, it helps to understand who she was before any of this. She was born on August 14th, 1999, in Alton, Illinois, the same city she would never get to leave. Those who knew her growing up describe a kind, soft-hearted kid. At just 10 years old, she chose to spend her birthday raising donations for a local animal shelter instead of asking for gifts for herself. It's a small detail, but it says a lot about the kind of person she was. She graduated from Jersey Community High School in 2017, and by her early 20s, she was working at a Dairy Queen, building a life for herself in the town she'd grown up in. By the time of her death, she was weeks away from becoming a mother. She and those closest to her had already given the baby a nickname, Baby Bean, long before she was born. The man in Liese's life was Deundrea Holloway Jr., also in his early 20s at the time. The two had been in an on-and-off relationship for roughly 2 years. It was not a stable one, and the child Liese was carrying was not his, a fact that would later be confirmed by investigators, and one that adds a difficult layer to everything that follows. According to people close to Holloway, the weeks and days leading up to June 9th were marked by a noticeable shift in him. Family members who spoke with him during that period, including a half-sister and an uncle who were both in contact with him shortly before the murder, would later describe someone who seemed increasingly unlike himself. Whether that was tied to stress, mental health struggles, or something else entirely is a question that would end up shaping much of what happened in the years after his arrest. Heidi Noel wasn't in the dark about the relationship. She knew it wasn't a healthy one. In her own words, spoken publicly after her daughter's death, she called it, quote, a tragic outcome of a 2-year on-and-off again domestic violence relationship. That single sentence carries a lot of weight. It means Heidi wasn't just grieving a sudden, senseless tragedy. She was grieving something she had seen coming in some form. She had spoken to Holloway herself in the past, more than once, about the way he treated her daughter. She had hoped, like most parents in that position would, that things would either improve or end on their own terms before anyone got hurt. They didn't end on anyone's terms, not in the way anyone could have prepared for. What's clear, looking back, is that the warning signs were there. What's harder to answer is why they weren't enough to stop what came next. Once investigators secured the scene, the pieces from that morning's separate, unconnected events started falling into place, fast. Heidi Noel had asked her daughter's landlord, a man named Joe, to check the building's security cameras even before officers arrived. That footage turned out to be critical. It showed a man leaving the building overnight, carrying a laundry basket, heading in the direction of a nearby smoke shop. He returned minutes later without it. Investigators cross-referenced the timestamp against the estimated time of death, and the footage lined up almost exactly. At the same time, the neighbors downstairs were being interviewed about the sound they'd heard the night before, the steady, rhythmic noise they dismissed as an argument and tried to sleep through. Once detectives laid out the timeline, that sound stopped being background noise and became evidence. It matched the same window as the CCTV footage. Whatever had happened in that apartment, the people living below had unknowingly heard it happen in real time. Not far from the building, the construction crew who'd been digging through a nearby dumpster that morning had already called it in. What they found waiting inside matched the description investigators were now building from the footage and witness accounts. Clothing and personal items consistent with the struggle, discarded in a way that suggested someone had tried to get rid of them quickly, in the middle of the night, without much thought for where they'd land. According to people close to Holloway, in the hours after the murder, he didn't go far. He reportedly showed up at his half-sister PJ's home, and later at his grandmother's, behaving in a way that those around him found alarming. He is said to have cut his own hair and gotten rid of the clothes he'd been wearing. At some point during that same stretch of time, he reportedly handed over items belonging to Liese, her ID, her debit card, and her keys, to people around him, seemingly trying to distance himself from anything that could tie him to her apartment. These details come from accounts close to the family rather than official police reports, but they paint a picture of someone who knew, almost immediately, that what he'd done couldn't stay hidden for long. And in a strange twist, it wasn't a manhunt that ultimately brought Holloway into custody. He was picked up in Gillespie, Illinois, roughly 45 minutes from Alton, on an unrelated charge of bicycle theft. It was Gillespie police, running his information through the system, who realized they were holding a suspect wanted in connection with a murder investigation in another jurisdiction entirely. A minor, almost unrelated arrest is what actually closed the loop. Once in custody, Holloway was brought in for questioning. According to investigators, he declined to answer questions and asked for a lawyer, which brought the interview to an end almost as soon as it started. For days after Liese's body was found, on June 13th, prosecutors filed charges. 2 counts of first-degree murder, intentional homicide of an unborn child, dismembering a human body, an offense relating to a motor vehicle, and concealment of a homicidal death. Then Alton Police Chief Marcos Polito addressed the public shortly after, calling the crime abominable and offering condolences to Liese's family and friends on behalf of the department. Holloway's bond was set at $2 million. On paper, the case looked closed. Investigators had their suspect, their evidence, and their charges. But what came next would take years to resolve, and would raise questions nobody expected at the start of a case like this one. With Holloway charged and in custody, most people watching this case from the outside probably assumed a trial and a resolution weren't far off. That's not what happened. Just a few months after his arrest, Holloway's public defender raised a question that would end up defining the next 2.5 years of this case. Was he actually mentally fit to stand trial at all? In September of 2022, a court ordered a psychological evaluation, and the results led a judge to rule that Holloway was, at that time, unfit to stand trial. Under Illinois law, that doesn't mean a case gets dropped. It means the court proceedings pause, and the defendant is sent for treatment until, and unless, they're restored to competency. Holloway was transferred to an Illinois Department of Human Services facility, where he remained for several months. By February of 2023, doctors determined he had regained fitness, and he was returned to Madison County to continue facing the charges against him. For a while, it looked like the case was finally moving forward again. Then, in 2024, his defense team requested a second competency evaluation. Associate Judge Neil Schroeder ordered another court-appointed psychologist to assess him a second time, and the case paused once more while that evaluation played out. It's worth pausing on that detail because it explains something that might otherwise seem strange. How a crime from June of 2022 didn't reach a resolution until January of 2025. This wasn't one clean process from arrest to sentencing. It was closer to 2.5 years of stops and restarts, built entirely around the legal question of whether Holloway was fit to answer for what he'd done. Eventually, he was found fit to proceed, and in December of 2024, Holloway pleaded guilty. Not to every original charge, but to 3: first-degree murder, intentional homicide of an unborn child, and concealment of a homicidal death. The plea. Here's the part that surprises a lot of people learning about this case for the first time. Despite 2 victims, Liese and her unborn daughter, prosecutors were not able to pursue a life sentence on the grounds of 2 separate murders. That's because of a ruling from the Illinois Supreme Court, which determined that an unborn child cannot legally be treated as a second murder victim for the purpose of seeking a life sentence. In practical terms, that ruling shaped the entire structure of the plea deal and the sentencing that would follow. It's not that the state didn't want the harshest possible outcome. It's that the law, as written and interpreted by the state's highest court, drew a boundary around what was legally available to them. With the plea entered and the legal question of competency finally behind them, the case moved, at last, toward its final chapter, sentencing. On January 17, 2025, Deundrea Holloway stood before Associate Judge Neil Schroeder in Madison County Circuit Court to learn his sentence. The judge handed down 60 years, 30 for the murder of Liese Dodd, 30 more for the death of her unborn child. Under Illinois law, with the Supreme Court's earlier ruling limiting what prosecutors could pursue, this was effectively the harshest outcome available to them. Before sentencing was finalized, Heidi Noel addressed the court directly. Her words that day were simple and devastating in their simplicity. On that night, she told the courtroom, "I received a life sentence. To live the remainder of my life without my beautiful, loving, sassy daughter. A life without knowing the joy of watching Liese raise my granddaughter." State's Attorney Tom Haynes spoke afterward, addressing both the courtroom and the broader public who had followed this case for nearly 3 years. He was direct about what 60 years actually meant in practice. "I don't believe," he said, "he'll be seeing the light of day as a free man." Alton Police Chief Jarrett Ford also commented publicly following the sentencing, crediting the department's investigators for the speed and thoroughness of the original case, which had led to Holloway's identification and arrest within days of the murder back in 2022. Throughout the hearing, Holloway said nothing. He was led out of the courtroom in silence and taken into the custody of the Illinois Department of Corrections. Today, Deundrea Holloway is serving his sentence at Menard Correctional Center in Southern Illinois. As of now, there's no record of a pending appeal. Barring any future legal developments, this is where the case of Liese Dodd comes to rest. Liese Dodd never got to meet her daughter, but her story, and the warning signs that preceded it, are exactly the kind of case this channel exists to document honestly and thoroughly. If you want cases covered with this level of depth every time, subscribe to Crime Trail Archives and let us know in the comments what case we should break down next.